She gave her last $3 to a stranger who couldn't pay his bus fare, unaware that he was a millionaire CEO who would spend the next few weeks trying to rewrite the ending of her story. She thought it was just a small act of kindness. He saw it as the start of something life-changing. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The wind cut through the city like a thief in the night, sharp, invisible, and relentless. It swept down alleys and across sidewalks, carrying with it the mingled scents of hot dogs from street vendors and the sour tang of exhaust fumes. Streetlights buzzed to life one by one, washing the pavement in tired amber. It was the kind of evening that made people walk faster, hands buried in pockets, eyes fixed straight ahead. But not everyone had the luxury of hurrying home. Mara Jennings stood at the edge of the cracked sidewalk, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled her worn jacket tighter around her thin frame. Her boots, scuffed and 2 sizes too big, clomped quietly as she stepped off the curb and approached the bus stop. Her breath misted in front of her face. She had just left a downtown diner after scrubbing grease from its kitchen floor for 3 hours. They'd paid her cash, barely enough for food and maybe a bus ride across town to the shelter before it filled up. The shelter always filled up. She stared down at the crumpled bills in her palm. $3 and some coins. Her thumb gently rubbed a smudge of ketchup from the edge of a dollar. Enough for tonight, she thought. I just need to make it there before 7. She wasn't alone at the stop. A tall man in a dark coat stood a few feet away, pacing slowly. His face was clean-shaven, his shoes far too expensive for this part of town, but his expression was quiet, distracted, like he'd lost something. He didn't look like someone waiting for a bus. Not the usual kind, anyway. The bus approached in the distance, headlights slicing through the twilight haze. Mara's heart picked up pace. She stepped forward slightly, just as the tall man reached into his coat pocket and froze. No, 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 he muttered under his breath. He patted his other pockets, then again, faster now, more frantically. His hands moved from coat to pants to jacket lining. Nothing. The bus doors hissed open, and the driver gave a half glance at the small line forming. Sir, the driver asked. Elliot Crane, CEO of Crane Tech Industries, though no one here knew that, offered a tight smile and a shake of the head. I seem to have misplaced my wallet. It was just here. He turned to step aside, allowing others to board, but his face flushed with embarrassment. People behind him grumbled. Mara stepped forward. She saw his face clearly now, tired but composed. There was no arrogance in him, just quiet panic. Without thinking, she reached into her pocket again, pulled out a few folded bills, and held them out. I can cover you, she said, her voice soft but firm. It's just a bus fare. He blinked, taken aback. No, really. I couldn't. That's kind of you, but... It's okay, she interrupted, pressing the bills toward the driver. He's with me. The driver shrugged and waved them both on. Elliot looked at her as if she'd just done something extraordinary. In his world, where things were bought, calculated, and weighed, that kind of kindness wasn't something he often saw, much less received. Thank you, he said quietly as they walked down the aisle. No problem, she replied and took a seat near the front, dropping her small cloth bag by her feet and resting her head against the window. Elliot sat a few rows behind her. He watched her through the gap in the seats. Her face was turned toward the glass, but her reflection told its own story. She looked worn, eyes heavy-lidded, lips chapped, fingers nervously tugging at a loose thread on her sleeve. She didn't look at anyone, didn't expect thanks or even notice his gaze. She just sat there, exhausted. Human. The bus rumbled through the city, passing restaurants with flickering signs, a grocery store with fogged-up windows, and families hurrying home with bags in tow. Mara didn't seem to notice any of it. She blinked slowly, head leaning forward with every bump in the road. She looked like someone used to keeping her body in motion, but her soul tucked away for safekeeping. About 20 minutes into the ride, the The bus stopped near an old community park, and Mara rose quietly. She picked up her bag and stepped off without a word. She disappeared down a narrow street, her silhouette folding into the dusk like a forgotten bookmark. Elliot watched her go. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he knew he owed her more than a thank you. The brakes squealed softly as the bus rolled to a stop at the next corner, the engine humming low as passengers rose from their seats. Elliot remained seated for a moment, watching the door where the woman, Mara, he would soon learn, had just exited. The automatic doors hissed shut behind her, and the bus rumbled back into motion, leaving behind nothing but cold air and the quiet void of her absence. He felt strangely unsettled. She had helped him. A woman with barely anything to her name had handed over what was likely her last couple of dollars just to help a man she didn't know. He could have been anyone. A thief. A liar. Yet she had offered help freely, instinctively, with no trace of hesitation or bitterness. That kind of compassion didn't come from privilege. It came from somewhere deeper. Somewhere carved out through hardship. The bus shifted with another turn, and Elliot leaned forward slightly to adjust his coat. That's when he saw it. Something white, sticking just barely out from beneath the seat in front of him. Seat 17B. The seat she had taken. He reached out and gently tugged at the corner of the paper. It was an envelope, a little wrinkled, soft from being handled too often. There were smudges at the edge, and a faint coffee stain across the back. The front of the envelope bore a name, handwritten in looping, careful letters. Mara Jennings, 134, East Winfield Avenue. Unit B, rear entrance. He looked at it for a long moment, unsure whether he should even be holding it. But curiosity stirred something in him, an ache, maybe, or a responsibility. He glanced around. The bus was mostly empty now, and no one had noticed. He slowly lifted the flap and peeked inside, handling it delicately, as if it might crumble in his hands. Inside was a folded letter, a single-page document from the New Hope Transitional Housing Authority, dated just 4 days ago. The type was standard and impersonal, but its message was anything but. Dear Ms. Jennings, we regret to inform you that your application for temporary accommodation at New Hope Shelter has been denied. Due to limited capacity and insufficient documentation of stable income, we are unable to approve your request at this time. We encourage you to reapply in 60 days or seek assistance from other agencies listed below. A list of hotline numbers followed. None of them meant shelter tonight. None of them meant food tomorrow. The signature at the bottom was scribbled, more like a formality than a human response. Elliot's jaw tightened. He could hear the soft murmur of the city outside, the hum of neon, the hollow clang of distant construction. Yet all he could focus on was the image of that woman staring quietly out the window, her reflection painted in shadows. And now this letter. No bed. No support. Try again in 60 days. 60 days. His gaze returned to her name. Mara Jennings. Even her name sounded gentle. Kind. Someone's sister, someone's daughter. He imagined her holding this letter in her hands, reading it under a streetlight or on a diner break, folding it carefully, placing it into the envelope like a wound being pressed shut. And she still paid for his fare. A knot formed in his throat. He leaned back against the cold metal frame of the seat and exhaled through his nose. He knew what most people would do. Discard the letter, maybe leave it at the front of the bus with the driver in case she came back. But something inside him said no. This wasn't just lost mail. This was a cry that had been swallowed by the system and met with silence. And he couldn't ignore it. Not now. He looked out the window again. The streets were changing, more storefronts, brighter lights. His stop was coming. He slipped the letter carefully back into its envelope and tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat, close to his chest. 134 East Winfield Avenue. It wasn't far. Maybe 30 minutes by cab. He could be there tonight. He didn't know what he would say. He didn't have a plan. But he knew this much. He couldn't let the story end at that bus seat. Not when someone like Mara Jennings had given what little she had to help a stranger. Not when she was out there, walking dark streets, likely with nowhere to sleep and no idea that someone was thinking about her. No idea that someone now held the key to her name, her address, and maybe, just maybe, a second chance. Elliot Crane stood at the base of his building's towering glass atrium the following morning, his reflection fractured in the marble floor beneath him. Around him, men and women in pressed suits passed by, voices clipped and purposeful, footsteps sharp. His assistant was somewhere upstairs holding a schedule full of meetings he was supposed to care about, investment updates, partnership calls, a lunch with the city commissioner. Things that used to matter. But all he could think about was 134 East Winfield Avenue. The envelope sat heavy in his coat pocket. Every time he adjusted his lapel or reached into his coat, his fingers brushed it like a trigger, a reminder. He hadn't slept much the night before. He had laid in bed thinking of her, Mara Jennings, and that letter, the one no one should ever have to receive. He thought about how casually she had given him those few dollars, probably not knowing how she would get them back. Or if she ever would. By 9:15 a.m., Elliot made his decision. He canceled every meeting, gave his assistant no reason other than personal, and disappeared down the elevator without explanation. The doorman watched him step into a waiting Blacktown car, a rare moment without a driver or entourage. He asked the GPS for directions to the address. East Winfield Avenue was not part of the city he usually saw. The buildings changed quickly once he crossed the river. Glossy glass turned into soot-streaked brick. Green parks became chain-link fences overgrown with rust. Broken windows, graffitied walls, the occasional boarded-up shop with an old neon sign still buzzing faintly in the daylight. A different rhythm of life pulsed here, grittier, slower, but no less human. The car slowed in front of a narrow alleyway. The address, scrawled on the envelope, matched the faded numbers on a side door of an old 3-story tenement. It looked more like a utility entrance than a residence. A busted mailbox dangled from one nail, its lid stuck open like a yawn. He got out and stood in front of it. No doorbell. No intercom. Just a rusted metal handle and layers of peeled paint. He knocked twice. Nothing. He waited, glancing up at the narrow, crooked fire escape that creaked slightly in the wind. After another knock, he pressed his ear lightly against the door. No footsteps. No voices. He sighed, stepped back, and scanned the surrounding area. There was a tiny corner store across the street, Wilson's Market, with faded sun-bleached posters in the window and a handwritten EBT accepted sign taped to the glass. He crossed quickly, the envelope still in his hand. Inside, the bell jingled overhead. A man with a salt and pepper beard looked up from behind the counter, where he was unpacking boxes of canned beans. He gave Elliot a slow once-over. "You're lost," the man said plainly. "Not exactly," Elliot replied, approaching. He held up the envelope. "I'm looking for someone. Mara Jennings. She might live in that unit across the street. Or used to." The man's brows lifted faintly. "You a friend of hers?" "Something like that," Elliot answered. The man studied him for another moment, then leaned an elbow on the counter. "Mara's a good one. Works hard. Doesn't cause trouble. Real quiet. She stays in the back room of that building. Used to be a laundry room before the landlord shut off the plumbing. Sleeps there some nights. Other times she's over at the shelter off Madison if they've got a bed." Elliot nodded slowly. "You know when she'll be back?" The man shrugged. "She bounces around. But she's at Benny's Diner 3 days a week. Cleans after close. You try there?" "No," Elliot said, his mind already shifting. "Where is it?" 2 blocks up. Take a left at the pawn shop. You'll see the pink awning." He thanked the man and left quickly, wind biting at his coat as he made his way down the cracked sidewalk. 2 blocks later, he saw it, a small diner tucked between a tattoo parlor and a boarded-up travel agency. Benny's Diner. The paint on the awning had chipped away at the edges, but the windows were spotless, and the linoleum floors inside gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights. He stepped inside and was hit with the scent of old grease and brewed coffee. A woman behind the counter raised an eyebrow. "We're not open yet," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. I'm looking for someone, he said. Mara Jennings. She works here. The woman gave him a quick, suspicious once-over. She's in the back. Scrubbing the grill, I think. Why? He hesitated. I just need to return something she lost. The woman motioned toward the back with a wary glance. Don't mess with her. She's good people. Elliot nodded and moved through the swinging kitchen doors. There, hunched over a steel sink filled with hot water and blackened pans, was Mara. Her hair was pulled back under a bandana, and she wore a borrowed apron 2 sizes too big. Her arms moved in steady circles as she scrubbed, focused and silent. He stepped forward cautiously. Mara? She flinched, turned. For a brief moment, confusion creased her brow, until recognition set in. Her eyes widened just slightly. You. I think you left this on the bus, he said, holding out the envelope. She stared at it, then back at him. You followed me? I read the address. I didn't want to invade your privacy, but I couldn't ignore it. She took the envelope slowly, her fingers brushing his. Her jaw tightened. It's nothing. Just another rejection. It's not nothing to me, he said gently. Her eyes searched his face, defensive and uncertain. What do you want? He hesitated. Then quietly, to thank you, and to help you. If you'll let me. Mara blinked, lips parting in disbelief. Why? Elliot exhaled. Because when I had nothing, you gave. And I don't forget things like that. Mara sat in the passenger seat of the black sedan, her eyes fixed out the window, though she wasn't really watching the streets roll past. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, fingers clenched around each other, knuckles pale. Her shoulders were stiff, jaw set in quiet tension. The city passed by in colors and motion, graffiti-splashed walls, schoolchildren kicking soccer balls near chain-link fences, a woman arguing on her phone outside a check-cashing store. But to Mara, it all felt muted, distant. Elliot glanced at her from the driver's seat. He hadn't told her everything yet. Not the full plan. Not the scale of what he had decided to do. He knew she wouldn't trust it right away. Where are we going? She asked, not accusatory, just tired. Just somewhere safe, he said. She didn't respond, but he noticed her eyes flick to the rearview mirror, as if making sure she could still see the road behind her. Always watching the way back. Always prepared to leave. 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a modest but clean brick apartment building in the southern part of the city. Not luxury, but quiet. Safe. The kind of place where the front steps were swept in the mornings and someone's grandma always had soup cooking on the 3rd floor. Mara stared at it. This isn't a shelter, she said softly. No, Elliot replied. He stepped out and came around to open her door. She didn't move. I don't need a handout, she murmured. I know, he said. This isn't that. Reluctantly, she stepped out, bag slung over her shoulder like armor. He led her to the front door, pulling a small envelope from his jacket. Inside was a set of keys. I paid for the first 6 months, he said, handing it to her. It's yours for as long as you want to stay. No conditions. No cameras. No strings. She looked at the keys in her palm like they might burn her. Why? She asked again. Elliot paused. Because I can. Because you did something for me when you had nothing. And because you're not invisible, Mara. You never were. Her eyes filled with something unreadable, something somewhere between disbelief and grief. She looked away and wiped her face before he could see the tear fall. Inside, the apartment was small but warm. A kitchenette, a twin bed, a tiny bathroom. A window that let in real light. A refrigerator with a welcome note from the landlord. It was more than she'd had in years. She dropped her bag slowly and turned in a slow circle. It was quiet. No snoring. No crowded bunk beds. No shouting in the hallway. Just quiet. Her legs gave out before her pride did. She sat down on the edge of the bed and let herself breathe. Later that evening, Elliot returned, not with more gifts, but with information. A folder with a list of vocational programs. She had been a certified office assistant once, years ago. He'd called in a favor to get her an interview with a program that trained facility coordinators for large companies. It included a stipend. I didn't forge anything, he said, handing her the folder. Just ask them to look past the last few years and talk to the person in front of them. Mara held the paper in her hands as if it were too clean for her fingers. I don't know if I can do this anymore, she whispered. Trying. Every time I try, I fall harder. Elliot knelt slightly, so they were eye to eye. I'm not asking you to try alone. In the weeks that followed, she kept waiting for it to vanish. That apartment, the job training, the strange quiet of mornings that weren't cold. But it didn't vanish. She studied every night. She took the bus to classes. She ate warm food and slept on sheets that smelled like lavender and bleach. And slowly, she started to laugh again. First to herself, then out loud. The program instructors noticed her organization skills, her discipline, the way she never missed a day, even when she looked tired. By the end of the month, she was offered an internship, paid, and after that, a job as a facilities coordinator for a building not far from Elliot's own office. When Elliot showed up one day with a bouquet and a tiny key-shaped pin, symbolic, not literal, Mara rolled her eyes. Too much, she said. Still less than what you gave me. She smirked. A bus fare? No, he said. A reason to be better than the man I was. She said nothing, but her fingers tightened around the pin. It was a small thing. But sometimes it's the smallest things that unlock everything. The stage lights were softer than expected, warm, almost golden. They cast a quiet halo across the minimalist set. 2 chairs, a coffee table, and the City Talk Network logo glimmering in the background. Cameras clicked into position. A low murmur drifted from the modest studio audience, the sort of polite tension that comes just before something real is said. Elliot Crane adjusted the cuff of his tailored blazer, but his mind wasn't on his wardrobe. He glanced to his right, where Mara sat, wearing a simple navy dress and the same worn boots she had owned for years. She'd polished them, though. That had to count for something. She looked composed. Calm. But Elliot could tell by the way her thumb ran in slow circles over the pin on her lapel, the tiny key-shaped one he'd given her weeks ago, that she was nervous. It wasn't every day a woman who used to sleep behind laundromats was asked to appear on national television. The host smiled at both of them. Mr. Crane, Ms. Jennings, she began, her voice warm but professional. Thank you for being here. Your story has inspired people across the country. But I want to take it back to the beginning. Elliot, you're a CEO. What made you take an interest in a woman you met on a bus? Elliot smiled faintly, thoughtful. She gave me something when I had nothing, he said. And I don't mean a dollar bill. I mean kindness. She didn't know who I was. I could have been anyone. But she gave, without asking for anything in return. The host turned to Mara. And Mara, what made you offer to pay for a stranger's fare when you were, forgive me, struggling yourself? Mara hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. Her voice, when it came, was steady. I don't know, she said. Maybe it's habit. When you've lost a lot, sometimes the only thing you have left to give is humanity. That day, I just saw someone who looked like he needed help. So I helped. There was a pause. The audience was silent, not from lack of interest, but from the rare sound of truth being spoken plainly. I didn't expect anything, she added. People don't usually come back. Not for people like me. Elliot looked at her then, something proud and soft in his eyes. But I did, he said. And now, the host added, gesturing to the graphic behind them, the two of you are launching the Mara Initiative. Can you tell us what that is? Elliot nodded. It's a program dedicated to giving people, not statistics, not profiles, but actual people, a second chance. Housing, job training, mentorship. But more than that, dignity. Mara reminded me that not everyone who's struggling is broken. Most are just locked out. They need a key. Mara's eyes flicked down to her pin. The smallest smile tugged at her lips. Behind the scenes, the cameras panned to the audience, a mix of staff, media, and beneficiaries of the early pilot version of the initiative. Among them, a woman clutching a manila envelope filled with her application papers. A young man with a neat haircut and nervous posture. A single mother with her daughter bouncing on her lap. People waiting for the same door Mara once stood in front of. After the interview ended and the lights dimmed, Elliot and Mara walked out together into the bright afternoon. Reporters shouted questions from the sidewalk, but security ushered them toward the car. Elliot paused before stepping in. "You did good in there." Mara snorted. "I didn't curse. That's a start." He laughed. "You're more polished than you think." She raised an eyebrow. "Careful. I might start acting like a corporate woman." He glanced at her. "You are a corporate woman, with a citywide initiative named after you." She rolled her eyes. "Still doesn't feel real." "It is," he said softly. "And it's only the beginning." They got into the car. The driver pulled away. As they passed the city streets, the same ones she used to walk at night with a broken coat and aching feet, Mara pressed her forehead lightly against the window. The world looked different now. Not easier, but clearer. Somewhere along the line, she had gone from ghost to guide, from the forgotten to the face of change. Not because someone gave her a miracle, but because she offered one first. 1 year later, Mara stood behind a podium, her hands steady on either side, eyes sweeping the quiet room. She was no longer a guest on someone else's platform. She was the keynote speaker. The city's largest nonprofit summit had drawn hundreds of leaders, social workers, donors, and journalists into the grand ballroom. The chandeliers above her glittered like something out of a movie. But Mara no longer felt like a spectator to that world. She belonged. Her voice carried through the hall, not loud but grounded. "I used to sleep under stairs and behind supermarkets. I used to whisper my name to myself just to remember who I was. Today, I'm here to tell you that the difference between someone like me and someone like you isn't money. It's a door, and whether or not someone chooses to open it." The room was silent, not from disinterest but from awe. She continued, "When I first walked into a warm room with my own keys, I cried in the bathroom so no one would see. But the thing that scared me most wasn't being poor. It was being seen as less. The Mara Initiative wasn't built to save people. It was built to see them, to remind them they never stopped being people worth seeing." Near the back of the room, Elliot sat among mayors and executives and campaign directors, not as the star of the show, but as a proud witness. He had learned something powerful over the past year. The best kind of help wasn't rescue, it was recognition. And now Mara was leading the charge. She stepped down from the podium to a standing ovation, handshakes, even tears. After the event, a young woman approached her outside. She was maybe 19, holding a toddler on her hip and a worn folder of documents. I heard you speak," she said. "I'm not here for a handout. I don't want my little girl to think I gave up." Mara looked her in the eyes and smiled, not with pity, but with understanding. "You're not giving up," she said. "You're showing up. That's enough for today." She handed the girl a card with the Mara Initiative's intake contact. "Come Monday. We'll figure the rest out together." As the young woman walked away, Mara looked up at the wide city skyline. There had been a time when she thought life had a ceiling, that people like her didn't get past a certain point. But standing here now, keys in her pocket and fire in her chest, she knew the truth. There was no ceiling, only doors, and she had become the one holding them open. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.